Nothing in life is exactly what it appears. I don't believe in true black or white, and it's only the gray matter that basically defines each one of us. That's the world you're going to see in the verbal tour you're about to take. I'm Todd McFarlane, and I've created this world. Join me. When HBO first approached me to try and bring Spawn to the TV screen, I remember that I'd had previous conversations with some of the networks, and they were thinking that the character, because they had seen some of the comic book charts where he was the #1 selling book in the country, still is, 5 years later, that they thought that he would be able to translate into a Saturday morning cartoon, just because he was selling more than a Superman or Batman or an X-Men. But I know that when I had the conversations with them that they hadn't actually seen the product in and of itself, because if they had and they had done their homework, then they would see that there's no way that this guy is meant to be translated onto something that is for an audience that's really under the age of 12. When HBO made the phone call, ultimately I remember that the first thing that I said to him, because I was getting tired of having the same conversations with everybody, was, if I do the show for you, can I say the word fuck? And it wasn't that I wanted to use that word explicitly, but I figured that if the representatives and executives at HBO would allow me to get to that point, then I would be able to do all the things that are below kind of the intent of what that word means. So, as you can see here by the show that we've got now, the time slot that this originally came out on was at 12 o'clock midnight on a cable channel, and you're dealing with an audience for the most part that's going to be over 16 years of age, and probably for the most part like a young college crowd, and you can't give them the same kind of animation that they're used to. People are afraid of doing anything out of the norm, out of the Disney kind of mode, and doing things that aren't quite cute and cuddly. And one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this thing is to try and bring some of the sensibilities that they have over in other countries like Europe, and especially in Japan, where their animation, they do a lot of R-rated animated shows, the equivalent of like Terminator and Die Hard, animated onto the screen. And I wanted to see if we couldn't bring some of those sensibilities here. Now, part of that is that one of the things that seems to be missing in most animated shows is, as you can see here, the color black. People forget that black is a color, and that by using the black and using the shadows with the show that we have, given that our character lives in the back alleys of New York, that we can bring a sense of mood and a sense of atmosphere to the show that basically hasn't been seen on this side of the waters for, literally for a long time. What you're seeing here at the beginning right now is that it was a very intentional thing on my part, that I wanted to literally start the first 3 minutes of the show with a bang. So we've already taken out one guy. Boom, there goes guy number 2. We introduced Spawn. Spawn is in the show right now, and unlike, let's say, the movie or some of the other things, he's actually exists, and we hit the ground running with them, and we try to see whether the audience can play catch-up with us. We try to do some editing tricks there where we slow down the bullet, the slow motion of the cigarette falling, just to give a sense of something that's a little bit different, and we're not just using the same headshot, cut that you would normally see in the regular animated show. Some of the violence that is maybe here, again, we wanted to make a statement right at the very beginning that either, when people see this for the first time, especially on television, that they were either, I didn't want Martha and Herman, the 50-year-old couple, to turn on the TV set and watch it, and I either needed them to get really offended real quick and turn off the TV and get out of the way, or the reason we needed to start off with kind of like 4 or 5 guys kind of getting torqued really quickly was because the audience that we were going for, I needed them to watch this show and say, at midnight with one of their buddies, go, did I just see a cartoon guy just say the word shit and he put a gun in a guy's mouth? Get Freddie on the phone him up right now, tell him channel 22, we got a guy saying shit and he's animated. And just because of that, in and of itself, it makes the show either offensive to people or it makes it really cool. And the audience that we've always aimed for is that MTV generation that basically is kind of tired of mom and dad, trying to pick their entertainment for them, and it's you can see again we're gonna have 3 hours together here, folks. That you're gonna see that this stuff isn't for mom and it's not for grandpa. Dad for the most part usually gets it. He just can't endorse it in front of mom because he'll get in trouble. And the little kids in the family, it's not meant for them either. What we've got is a show. Again, see, that guy almost got burnt right there, and we poured the gas on him. Those are the kind of themes that, again, we give a little bit of tension here. Here's Spawn here. Listen to the cape hiss. The cape, if you switch it when you're watching this with sound, the cape not only comes up, but it hisses because, again, what we're trying to convey with this costume is that, again, it's alive and it becomes a being in and of itself. But overall, the attitude we wanted to set off at the very beginning was that we needed either one of two things. We either needed you to get it, and so that if you were into it, you'd watch it, or we needed you to get out of the way. And so, again, I think within 5 minutes of this show, you can show this to your mom and she'll be out of the room. And as a matter of fact, she'll be looking at you thinking that you're crazy and that society's going down the tubes. I find it amusing, too, that just because mom doesn't get something that it necessarily is bad, it just means that it's just not endorsed by mother, and if she's not improving it doesn't make it bad. It just means it's not meant for rabbis and Papa. Here's some of the scene. Here's a scene here where, again, we start getting into flashbacks. Now I'm going to be jumping around here, but that the fire on that man when he pulled the trigger is now flashing back Al Simmons, who's the Spawn's memories right here. And one of the things that we really had to play with when we had the story was, first off, when we went overseas to Korea, we were dealing with the studio that, and when they weren't working on our show, we're doing stuff like Care Bear and Yogi Bear or something like that. And it was tough to get them to switch off their kind of cute, cuddly phase and come into us and do our kind of dark, demented thing that, again, had blood. I mean, again, we redid a lot of blood. The thing that drives me nuts with some of the blood is it looks like honey instead of splatters. But, again, those are the things that I'll be talking about throughout this show that we had to literally go back and either try and either redo or reteach them to think a different way, or that we had to edit around it. And one of the things that brings a style to our show, that had to bring a style to our show, is that instead of just using it as an adult theme and saying, oh, let's just show, some naked ladies and some guns and say a few cuss words, that we needed to present an attitude with the show that had an essence to it, that, again, when you saw it, you go, yeah, this is something that's meant for that crowd that, again, that likes their music a little bit loud and likes to stay out a little bit late, and for the most part, get the joke. Again, there's nothing. I mean, if you stand close to what we're trying to convey here, that this man Spawn ultimately is a man returned from death and given powers by hell, that if you stand too close to the picture we're trying to paint here, it can be assumed that Al Simmons and Spawn is a satanic or endorses Satanism or some of that silly stuff. But the actual history of creating this character comes from the fact that, I'd done comic books for 10 to 12 years, and then Batman and Hulk and Spider-Man, and, eventually when I started a new company and we went and created Spawn, that the character, I felt, was only going to be as strong as his villain. So when you're sitting down and you're starting to create a story and you go, okay, the hero is formed by the dilemmas you put him in, who's the biggest bad guy I could think of? And to me, it was fairly obvious. It's the guy that lives downstairs, So the mere fact that he's up against this force, he's not really endorsing it wholeheartedly, although the moms will misinterpret that because, again, they're standing too close to this 6x6 painting. They're about 2 inches away from it, and they're looking at a dark spot on the painting. That the character is given his powers by hell, but he's somewhat struggling against it. But at the same time, the gray matter comes that this guy isn't Clark Kent, and he's not Bruce Wayne, he's not a Boy Scout by any stretch of the imagination, and that even though he's got these powers now that can potentially, stop robbers and all the bad guys that you would normally see in comic books, the reason that he's back now isn't for revenge. It's for Wanda, and Wanda is his wife. That happens to be the name of my wife. And again, when you're creating characters, and I don't consider myself much of a writer, that you try to pull from your own personal experience, so that makes things a little bit easier. And I know that I'm not a religious man by any stretch of the imagination, but it's my strong belief that, anybody that got in a fight with, their wife or their, girlfriend and ended up going to get a loaf of bread, and on the way to the drugstore, they ended up getting hit by a semi-truck and getting pasted. That I don't care if you're a Catholic, if that's not how you want to leave. If somebody gave you the option to come back and they said you've got 5 seconds to say goodbye to your wife and say you're sorry that you ended it with an argument, and that you could kiss your children goodnight before you go through the pearly gates, I think most people would take that deal and they'd sign on a dotted line. And essentially, it's the deal that Al Simmons made here in the story of Spawn, that when he died, that he wanted to see his wife, which is what I would want to do. And he came back and he essentially got the deal. It's just that because it happened in the blink of an eye, he never really read the fine print of the deal. And so, though he's getting what he wanted, which is to see his wife, the devil, the Malbolge, as we call him in the story here, is a trickster in history. And he brings him back and puts him back on, Earth. I wouldn't call him alive. It'd be more in a state of like a vampire, that he's just eternally, an undead walking the Earth now. But it's now 5 years later from the time of his death, although to Al Simmons, it's only been the blink of an eye. So to him, he was standing in Korea. He was killed, and now he's in New York City, and he just blinked his eyes. But to the rest of the world, 5 years have passed. Within those 5 years, his wife is now remarried. She's remarried to his best friend. And again, unlike Hollywood stories, it's not like she married his murderer, so that's like it's an easy way to snuff out the husband. Terry, who's the one that remarried Wanda. If Al Simmons had to pick one guy to take care of Wanda, it would have been Terry. So now the dilemma is, does he step into this life that Wanda now has a child, and I've intimated, too, that Al was impotent and wasn't able to bring her children, and that was, again, something that was very important to her, starting a family. So he comes back 5 years later to see the love of his life, and essentially she's remarried. She's got a happy life to a guy that's good, and she has her child. And the question now becomes to Al, a.k.a. Spawn, does he now interrupt all of that just to get his life back? Does he ruin her life potentially to fix his life? Now, mixed in with all of that, the job that he did from 9 to 5, although again, he was a good man and treated his wife fairly well, that he was a trained government assassin, one of the elite that worked for a secret security service that basically went out and did reconnaissance and covert operations internationally for the government, and basically was one of the best trained killers that we had in the government's employ. Now, that's the reason on some levels that he was picked by Hell, because again, if he was a good guy and he worked at the bank and he made sure that every penny was counted up and he was a good family man, then it seemed like it was a very bad choice on the devil's part to pick this man to come back and lead, his potentially the army of hell to, the final battle of Armageddon, which is what he's caught up in. So Al Simmons, although he's trying to come back to his wife, which we see right here, which is, the first thing he does when he comes back to Earth, instinctually, early on, you saw that he took out 3 or 4 guys, but that was his instinct as a trained assassin. But now he's basically just trying to get back into the personal needs and wants that I think that each one of us would have if we all had a superpower. We'd just go, how does it affect me directly and personally? And now he's seeing right here, he's discovering that his wife has the child, and his wife is married or had some kind of relationship with Terry, and now all of a sudden his whole reason for coming back from the grave is now basically taken away from him. So the story now begins is, how does a man who basically isn't even human anymore, and on some levels the only reason for him coming back has now been taken away from him, how does he put the pieces together and continue to go forward and to come up with basically a new meaning for his life? The answer that Hal wants is that he doesn't, that he basically slowly either A, crumbles and gives up the ghost, and basically just reverts, and his soul comes back to hell at the end of this deal, Or, as we see here, the appearance of the clown, he is a chaperone of hell, that basically there to not only put the knife in the gut of Spawn to tell him how bad the situation is, but he's hoping that he can tap into the instincts of him being that trained killer who follows orders, so that Spawn basically will learn on Earth to become the general that hell needs him to be, so that maybe potentially in 10 million years, heaven and hell, when they have their battle on Earth of Armageddon, that Al Simmons can be one of the great generals that leads, the hordes of hell to that great battle, and make sure that, again, that they have the advantage over heaven. Because, again, the thing we have to look at here, not that, like I said, I'm a religious man, but I think guys like me can mess with the Bible a lot better than those that find it to be something that they should cherish. Because otherwise, if you're a great believer in the good book, and you mess with it, then that's a little bit of blasphemy, where a guy like myself, looks at it as an interesting piece of work, and if you put a few twists in it, then I think that it becomes even more intriguing, because we all have a stereotype of what heaven and hell and good and evil is all about. So the story that we're playing here, and that later on we're going to see that we're going to see the presence of heaven and what the angels look like, is that when the big battle does come between heaven and hell, that again, not only do the forces of hell have to be fairly vicious, but so do the forces of heaven. Because again, from my perspective, not really paying that close attention to the Holy Book, that if only the good Mother Teresa's and all the sweet little bingo ladies and the ladies that solicit for Salvation Army go up to the pearly gates, and Genghis Khan and Hitler and all the psycho killers go downstairs with Chucky Manson someday, then when the floodgates open up and we have the big battle, I'm telling you, if I got $20, I know who I'm betting on. Hell's going to win that thing, and it's going to be an open and shut case, because those bingo ladies, I don't think they're going to stand a chance against old Genghis there, because he's going to wield that sword pretty tough, and I don't think that their little card marker thing's going to do much of a force to stop them. So what we have to create is a story in that not only is hell vicious, but the only way you can stop it on some level is the old might makes right. So heaven has to also be equally as terrible, if you will, or good. And the answer is that both of them have a lot of gray matter, and that everything isn't exactly what it appears to be. For instance, Al Simmons, who's now returned as a Spawn, could be perceived as a man trying to struggle to gain his humanity. That could be perceived by us as going, oh, okay, he's a good guy. Here it is again, we flash back to his moments with his wife, because these are the moments that he cherishes most, and they've been stripped away from him. Now, you can say, well, there's a little bit of good in him, but you see the things that he's done with his killing as both a human, and some of the things he does now being pushed as a Spawn. So the forces of heaven now come down and say, oh, he's a hell Spawn, aka then he's also equal to Hitler, or he's also equal to Genghis, and that therefore he must be killed because he comes from hell. But the answer is that just because you come from either heaven or hell doesn't necessarily make you purely good or purely bad, because I see the whole theology of what we've established here in the show is that it's more of like if you think of it as like the NBA draft on some level, or Hollywood buys a lot of options, if you're aware of that process, where they'll buy an option or to an idea, and they don't ever intend to use it, but they just want to make sure that, when Columbia buys the option, they just don't want, Paramount to get the idea, even though they have no use for it. And so the question becomes that if this is a draft of souls, and so again, it's a very slow chess game that's being played out here, that if it's God's turn and it's his choice, and he can wait for as ever long as he wants to make his next move, if Genghis Khan dies, does he pick Genghis Khan not because he thinks Genghis deserves a nice little soft pillowy spot on a nice cloud someplace in dimension 42, but more that if he picks Genghis Khan, then he's basically blocking the use of of that particular soul or that particular evil for the guy downstairs. And consequently, the coin could be flipped, that if it was Hal's choice to pick and Mother Teresa was to pass away, does Hal pick Mother Teresa not because she's going to grow his army, but because then she can't use whatever good and pure is in her heart upstairs in the forces of heaven's, guard, and the people that are basically assimilating towards basically the final confrontation. So it's those kinds of questions that, as we get deeper into the show, and as we get ultimately into seasons 2 and 3, become the bigger piece of the puzzle that Spawn is caught up into. This big thing that ultimately is Armageddon. Now, given that each one of us is human in and of our own rights, he doesn't care about any of this. He's got the clown pushing him. He's got Malbolgia's pushing him. He's got other forces and gauntlets coming at him, but he doesn't care about any of them. What makes sense to him is Al Simmons, and what Al Simmons is about a man who's now lost his wife, and how is he going to get those forces back? The one thing that he does get the flashbacks of is that there's somebody out there that killed him, and he's starting to get bits and pieces of who it was. At the same time, at the beginning of the show, you saw he took out 2 or 3 guys. Right now, we have the scene here where we're introducing the Mafia. So the Mafia, again, doing a little bit of a play here. We got the guy walking around in his little G-string, just so that when he's saying his cuss words in between, that people don't have a heart attack. Here's actually to our first time that we show a little bit of the nudity in the show. That again is either going to shock or not be much of a problem to people. But again, it's one of those taboos that most people aren't used to seeing. Either if ever. In animation, because again we've been raised on cute little cuddly stuff in Saturday morning cartoons. That these are the kind of things that have. I guess people could say shock value, but they're not there for that. We're dealing with a head mafia guy, a godfather, if you will, and although he's not nearly sophisticated as, Marlon Brando was, he's a guy that wields a lot of power, but he also likes to be, promiscuous and has his way with the ladies, and he's a bit of a ladies' man. The man he's dealing with right now on the telephone is a man by the name of Jason Wynn, who controls the secret security system for the government, and who was Al Simmons' employer in his past life 5 years ago. We tie in all of those themes with, again, the U.S. government here and a senator that lives in Washington, D.C. And what we try to do with those themes now is that earlier I was trying to explain some of the bigger story arcs, which are, hell and heaven and Armageddon and the great battle and, lost souls. And that becomes, like I said, one big, thing that's weighing on Spawn that he doesn't want to deal with. The things that I think are more interesting here with the story is dealing with subject matter that has an adult over the the age of 16 that we're far more used to seeing and potentially could happen in our backyard. So here we've got police brutality coming up here, although they're beating one of their own kind, because here's a guy who ratted on them because they were on the take. We've got the mafia, we've got government, and we've got CIA and intelligence people working. All those make for good movies. Those are the kind of shows that you see Tom Clancy writing about. And those are the kind of things that tie Spawn into kind of these urban settings. So one of the things that we're trying to accomplish in the show, too, is that although there is an element of fantasy here, I'm trying to make as much stuff around him be urban and be down to earth, and that the problems that he's dealing with isn't so much, again, the hell elements, but, what happens when he steals guns from an armament? What happens when he goes and he appears at a CIA office when he's supposed to be dead? What happens when he kills 2 of Tony Twist's best hitman and the mafia decides to get angry at him? Again, while all that's going on and he's trying to figure out his existence and what the powers are for, and more importantly, what good are they for, that again, we keep coming back and we keep pushing them with the characters, and the main character here is the clown, who basically is just going to keep riding him and shoving him, because ultimately, on some levels, I've set it up that, Spawn can't win, and that's really, the dilemma he has to try and come over, that if he does nothing, if he has these powers and he decides to turn his back on the world, then Hell still wins because he's letting this man's heart get cold, and he's letting all these atrocities go by that are flying through the earth, and you see them on the front page of every newspaper and on CNN, that these are these stories that you just can't believe that humanity is capable of doing to each other. And he has the power on some levels to stop that, but he's basically decided to do nothing about it. If he becomes a good guy and he says, "Oh, I'm going to be Superman and I'm going to go and kill the bad guys," then he's basically feeding the army of hell with all its souls, and he's building the army up so that again heaven or hell's still going to be winning the battle, because again he's bringing all these new recruits down into the battle of hell. If Spawn becomes this evil killing machine, then that's actually the best thing, because then he becomes the general that Hell wants him to become, and that's really ultimately where they'd rather have him. But either way, they're still going to get something. As we continue the story, one of the things that's going to continue throughout this whole thing is the storyline here of a kid killer. You saw that the guy in the ice cream truck just kidnapped the little girl. These are these urban themes that we want to bring, that again, some people find a little kind of tough subject matter to deal with, and they don't even want to see it. And so, I don't know, maybe it could be argued we're going a little bit overboard, but I just wanted to try and see if we couldn't come up with ultimately a drama, and when we're done writing the drama, that we then animate it, and don't look at it as a cartoon first, but we look at it as a drama that happens to be animated, that the conversations of the people are fairly real and fairly succinct. Spawn's sitting in the alley still trying to figure out why he's back from the dead, why his wife is remarried, what's his purpose in life. But all of a sudden, as he's sitting there trying to discover things, we get that he sees that a body has been dumped here, and the bum behind him tells him that this has been going on for a while, and that this guy keeps dumping these bodies every now and then. The question then becomes, does he get himself involved in somebody else's business, no matter how horrific it is, or does he just sit there and go, "It's not my problem, I'm Al Simmons, and I've got my own problems, and I need to deal with those first before I can deal with anybody else's." Part of the thing that we can do to add to his kind of torment, again, as you can see, is that he does live in the alleys, and again, it's because his face has been stripped and he was burnt to death. So again, he has no human features left. He becomes more of a Phantom of the Opera kind of character, where he becomes this kind of creature. And unlike Bruce Wayne, who's a good-looking millionaire that can get a date tomorrow, he's quite the opposite. That he actually has no money, and he has no good looks, and he has no history now.
Stupid questions.
Here's his face.
I've seen
Not quite as ugly as we'd like, but we'll pick that up again next season.
Makes me feel better.
But that he doesn't have these things, and so he has to live in these alleys, and the way we can get into his torment is, again, do these little kind of stereotypes potentially that I think look cool on kind of B horror movies, which is the rain. So we got the rain coming down. It's cold, the cape is blowing around. The shadows, as you can see, that the scene right here is 80% black. As we go into the face of the other people, again, here's another shot where we have 80% black. That I always envision this thing as being dark and black. When we talk to the animation people overseas, one of the things that I kept telling them was that, again, we can speed up the process potentially by doing your underdrawing in pencil, but then instead of using blues and greens and reds that you normally would, come in there and black out all the wrinkles and black out a lot of the features on a guy's face and set them in these shadows, and not only have their faces in shadows, but have them lean back into shadows. And it was really a struggle early on to get him past that, because again, See, here's one we had to get him in there. That again, black, Spawn being 90% black, with just green slits and a little bit of hint of rim lighting on his cape. I mean, to me, that is the essence of what Spawn is. He's just a ghost in the shadows. But again, when you're dealing with different studios across seas that have different mindsets, they're used to putting color on everything, and it took a long time to get them to understand that we wanted to hide some of the detail instead of showing it. The equivalent, could be said that I also make my own toys, that I do a lot of ink washes on them, and I had a tough time with those factories, saying, why do you want to make the toys look old and dingy when they should be new and plasticky? And the answer is because that's what the show has to be here. So again, once we come in there with all the black in here, we had to keep pounding it into them. I mean, literally, when I first broke into comic books, one of the first rules that was given to me, if in doubt, black it out. And what that means is that if you don't know how to do it or you're weak at it, then cover it up. So, in other words, it's not by accident that when you see a painting of Tarzan and his feet's in the grass and they cover up, the grass covers up his toes, it's the equivalent of, if in doubt, black it out, because toes are tough to draw. People can't draw feet very well, so you hide it with something. Here we have, as we get further into the show, this was actually our second episode in the original season. And again, we've got, more of the blacks, but again, that we've got, God forbid, in an R-rated show, we actually got violence, that isn't regulated, because again, we were initially on a cable station, and that we could come in here and present these themes that, again, are like cool mafia stories.
Just so you know.
So here, again, smart-ass mafia guys, even the way they talk and the way they're speaking there, again, I think are those things that kind of tie this down to an urban feel. So right now we're getting people involved in why are the hitmen there and why are they being, canvassing the back alleys and why are they hassling these bums. One of the things that this is also setting up, story-wise, is that Spawn, because he is this assassin, is although he just wants his own personal peace and quiet, it's coming across to the bums like he's starting to protect them. And so he's becoming this guy that eventually in the alleyways is going to be a guy that people are going to go, hey, if there's trouble in the alleys, we can rely on Spawn, who basically is a ghost that nobody seems to be able to catch, and he basically stands for the little guy.
What's his name?
Tony.
You're gonna tell Tony to keep his goons out of these alleys. As of now, they're out of bounds.
There's a lot of scenes here where he has white markings on his mask, but again, once we saw it when we got it back from the studios overseas, that too much of the markings I didn't like, and so here's the shot here where we wanted to see, black in his face. Again, we get a little bit of the hint of the white. I don't mind it. If we get an intense close-up, I don't mind it. But for the most part, I wanted to keep this guy, again, in black, so you just see a little bit of blood red on the cape. He's got, his cape is blood red. He's got the green slits, and again, he becomes this monolithic figure, so that, again, when you see him, that, again, compared to the cops, compared to the hitman, compared to the bums, that he becomes, without a doubt, the king. And that, again, that there's a presence to this man, that he stands there and he's regal and he's got a body language that you go with, if you had to pick a leader, although he wouldn't self-impose that on himself, that he is the guy that basically is in charge of the programming here, and that is essentially going to end up coming back on some levels to haunt him, because he doesn't want to be somebody that's involved in other people's lives, although it's the only thing that gives him any purpose once he finds out that he can't have his wife back. One of the other things that became a bit problematic in terms of doing all this is doing mouth charts. Here's an example really where I consider this to be actually a bad mouth chart, that I call it like the hippo mouth. Again, as we made the changes, you're going to see them as the show gets deeper and deeper, because again, we had to make what they call running changes, which by the time you start seeing what's wrong in episode number 1, they're already working on episode number 4. And so you can't even make the correction until episode 4 or 5. So that hopefully as we get further down here, some of the little nuances that kind of bothered me, we end up picking them up and making sure that we got a consistency to it, so that, hopefully, again, your last show is always the best one that you can do. one of the other things that we wanted to bring across too was that when we went away from, let's say, the forces of bad, and we went to Wanda, you just saw the scene that went by, that for the most part, when her and Terry are together, a lot of times you see the sunshine, especially when you see the kid. And so I wanted to use the color of the sky as being kind of a, yin and yang thing, where, good is black, or good is sunshine, light, and bad is dark. So that most of the bad stuff that happens in the show is going to happen when the sun is down. Because again, I think it's interesting that, like in the city of New York, where Spawn basically is hiding in the shadows, that you've got a town that's populated by over 8 million people, but things can happen in that city that nobody's aware of, and all of a sudden you can do conspiracy theories, and you can have a body just kind of appear, and 8 million people somehow had blind eyes or were sleeping at 3 o'clock in the morning, and just as much evil can happen there without anybody having any knowledge about it, as if you were in a town of 4,000 people and there was 25 acres in between each house. Here we have, again, the meeting of the minds of the senator with Jason Wynn, the head of the government security system. And what we set up here is that the senator is the father of the guy who is the child killer. And they're trying to do a government cover-up here. So what this was all about was that when Alan McElroy, who wrote the vast majority of these shows, and I was talking, that, we wanted to bring across, could you cover up, could you hide murder if you had enough power and you had enough money? Now, essentially, I guess the O.J. trial basically gives us half that answer. But, I think the answer obviously is that if you're in the right position, the right place, you can put a lot of things underneath the carpet, and you can actually literally hide the fact that you have somebody in your family that's not only committing murder, but the murder is basically those of small children, and potentially he's a pedophiliac, which again are all those themes that, to a father of 2 young daughters myself, that I find really repulsive. And so we're just trying to see here whether, we can give reasons and rationale so that these people can justify their actions. Because again, once you see some of the stories on the front page news, or you watch, shows that, give you investigative reports about these things, all these people, given the situation they're put in, can somehow justify. It's usually money. It's usually greed. It's really it's usually a simple answer for us humans. That we can justify and rationalize anything. I mean, ultimately, even as a government, we can rationalize why we're even at war and why we have to kill, other people because we're protecting our own boundaries. But the concept that we keep coming back to playing is not only is Spawn both capable of extreme good and extreme bad, but he's also capable, like everybody else there, of making those decisions based upon how he gets pushed, and so is everybody else. So the government can do a lot of good for us, but again, in certain situations to cover their own rear, they can do things that ultimately are detrimental to our society as a whole. And we've got a senator there, and we're going to have police people there. And here's the introduction of our 2 detectives, Sam and Twitch. They become an integral part of the whole show here. And again, we're going to be playing with a lot of these people, that each one of them is capable of literally turning on and off these switches that we have inside us, that basically can make us really either compassionate or SOBs. So, and I think each one of us, if we're honest with ourselves, can say that we've been in those situations. But those that even bitch to me and say, well, Todd, they want to censor me, or they think that like this stuff is going to break down society as a whole. I think that I could take any one of those moms that's complaining, and again, I use moms as a generic sense. It's not moms. Mom is anybody who doesn't get spawned. So I've seen like 25-year-old guys that's a mom to me, and I've seen 35-year-old ladies that aren't moms. So, so for the moms and the rabbis out there that don't quite get this whole picture here, I think that I can put those that complain about what we have here, I can put them in a situation. And so, for instance, the mom in Duluth, Iowa, that wants to sit there and say that, this is just, repulsive, repugnant, black, dark stuff with violence and over demon value. I think I could put her in a situation that if she had 2 children and she was cornered in a backyard someplace, and she had 4 guys coming at her, and they had 2 guns and knives, and the last words they said to her was, we're going right by you, and we're going to cut your children's head off right now. And all of a sudden, magically, a gun appeared in her hand, and the only way she could save her children from being decapitated and potentially sexually assaulted, if she pulled that trigger, I think I could get that mom to pull that trigger. And not only would she pull it, I think she'd pull the trigger repeatedly. So the point that we're trying to make here is that, again, depending on how you push all these characters in the show, that each one of them has a reason for doing it. And just like that mom who pulled the trigger and potentially killed 2 people that were coming for her children, the argument can now be made, is she a murderer, or was she just defending her children? And again, the fact remains that we have 2 dead bodies, so we can argue it one way, but once you start to bring in morals, which is, again, I think one of the things that makes Spawn somewhat interesting to those that watch it that are in the core demographic, that again, it's about debating whether might does make right, or an eye for an eye does make right. And some of the story elements we're going to put here are going to show that there isn't always, again, like I said, the black and the white, but what we actually have is that even though it might seem right to go and defend or protect Wanda in Al's case, that it only is going to lead to something worse. For instance, he's going to go and say, okay, I've got to go protect Wanda. Somebody's trying to kill her. I got to kill them. But the answer is going to be, because we've got the old wise sage here in the show, that if you go and you kill that guy, then you're basically becoming everything that hell wants you to become, because you're becoming a killer. So he wants you to kill. So it's not about whether you're defending Wanda. It's about that you're still becoming a killer, and that means that you're playing still, even though you think you're bringing a sense of justice, your own personal justice to the situation. What you're actually doing is becoming the character, the Spawn, the Hell Spawn that they want you to be, that you're now continuing to kill and continuing to maim and continuing to use all those instincts, and those instincts are the reason why you were picked. And the answer is that somewhere along the line, he has to come up with a way to get through all these solutions without taking the obvious, simple way of, I'm just going to whack him. He pushed me, I'm going to push him back. And now I'm going to push him back, but I'm going to push him back hard. Again, as he gets closer to potentially making those decisions in a good fashion, like he should, like hopefully each one of us grows and matures, he keeps getting tripped up by this character here, the clown, who again is a chaperone sent from hell. And he's a quirky little character. And again, he was designed as a fat little dwarf because I knew that there was going to be a lot of dark and kind of heavy themes in the show, and I needed to have kind of a light moment or black humor in the show. But essentially, as you're going to see coming up here, that his true form, because he does come from hell, is actually that of something that looks more like, again, a 10-foot demon. And this is what he looks like. And again, essentially, it's not that much further from the image that I've given in the comic book and in other places of what Malboja, the guy who gave him the powers, looks like. Because again, if using some of the plays in the Bible, that man was created in God's image, that essentially then if the Malboja looks like, this weird demonic thing, then essentially those that live down there should look like him too. So his body shape is close to what I think the general denizens of hell should look like. He's also there because besides being the chaperone and pushing Spawn to become the general, his frustration, which he says here in this storyline, is that, again, the humans have never been worthy of the Hell Spawn mantle. And that he thinks that basically the locals are the ones that should be the generals in training and should be the ones that should lead the final battle of Armageddon. And so essentially he's, to put it kind of in simple terms, he's kind of pissed that the foreigners are taking his job away, and that he's trying to show, although he has to be very subtle about it, given that he's supposed to be a guiding light here, he's trying to put the Spawn in positions where he will ultimately fail, and that if he fails enough times, and that this curse and this hellspawn that keeps coming back every 300 or 400 years, although it's a different person, keeps coming back every 300 or 400 years, if they keep failing, then maybe the devil will ultimately get to the point where he will understand that maybe they don't need to pick humans, because humans are flawed by their mere existence, and that you need to pick the actual local people, which are, you know, those that are born and raised and die in hell, which is what he's about. Again, when they're having their fight there, you could see that was all red. Here's something here that becomes curious to people. This is a counter. It now reads 9,962. What the counters indicate throughout the show is that, unlike Superman or unlike Flash or Spider-Man, that Spawn's powers are finite, and that when he gets the powers, that he just can't use them like Superman whenever he feels like, because the deal is that he's sent back on Earth to train, but that each time he uses his powers, he basically becomes a step closer to going back to hell and losing his soul completely. So in other words, if somebody was to give you a car and say you've got 1 tank of gas, but once your tank of gas, you run out of gas out of that car, is done, then basically I get your soul, and you needed a loaf of bread, then probably you'd either walk, run, jog, or skateboard, or get a bike before you'd actually rev up the car to go and get the bread, unless the loaf of bread was 900 miles away and you kind of had no choice. But maybe the answer then at that point might be that you're not really as hungry for the bread as, you know, you were maybe 10 minutes ago. So again, part of his struggle, as he's finding out here, and the old wise man here is telling him that, who's the narrator and the voiceover here, is trying to explain to him that basically the more you use your powers, the more you waste them, the closer you come to basically being sent back to hell for good, and you'll never solve your dilemma with Wanda or who you are as a human being. So again, we're trying to mix all these fabrics together, that he has to think about what his actions are, given that he is a trained killer. He has to think about how he uses his powers, and he has to think about whether he's going to do stuff for his personal good, or he's going to use it for, you know, his you know, a bigger purpose, which is maybe defending the bums out there. But if he's pushed in a position where he has no choice, then he's going to have to use those powers sparingly. Now, one of the things that became a bit of a debate overall when we were putting the show together is how many of the fantasy elements do we use within the show. So right here, this was originally episode number 3. We have this cyborg that ends up coming over from Rome, that is on the payroll, literally, of the head mafia people over in Rome, and he's called in as a favor to Tony Twist to basically hunt down whoever is in the alleys that basically has been taking out Tony's hitman, which, as we know by now, is Spawn. One of the things that we, again, like I said, we debated on is how many of these kind of comic book elements do we put into a show that has a lot of, watch this here, look at that. Takes his arm off, a little bit of blood dripping, throw the guy away, and then he's going to write his message in blood. See, to me, that's cool stuff. Anyways, so when we have the debate about what we put in there, it's if we're going to put these fantasy elements in there, let's see if we can't present them in a way that, again, aren't quite so cartoony. Although, again, like I said, it becomes very tough given that you got guys running around in tights, you know, even Spawn. I mean, how do you do, you know, a realistic story that has all these kind of human elements when it's basically a guy in tights that punches people in the face, you know? And so you got to try and, you know, disguise all of that in a way that basically people don't think they're actually watching a comic book that's animated. They think they're watching more of a sci-fi or even better than that, kind of a slight horror story. So what we try to do is like the figure that, you know, just ripped the arm off of the bum. His name is Overkill. That we try to keep him in shadows, and we try to build him in a way so he almost becomes kind of a 1990s version of Frankenstein. You know, you run into the dilemmas too, that when you're doing your original drawings for these characters, unlike the comic book where my style has a lot of intricate detail. What you need to end up doing here is simplifying everything. For Spawn, it was fairly easy because, again, you just put him in black and you keep 80% of him in the shadows, and I think he works. Where again, when the big robotic guy comes and he comes here, busting through the wall, that again, there's sometimes that I think we show a little bit more of him than we should. But one of the things that we try to get across is that, okay, since they're going to have a fight, and we've seen a fight a million times in comic book, how can we present this fight in a way that becomes a little more entertaining? And so, as you'll see here, that instead of them just going, slug me in the face, I'll slug you in the face, slug me in the face, I'll slug you in the face, we do cool lighting. There's, again, 80-90% shadow. We see silhouettes on the wall instead of a face to the mouth. The damage that they're going to cause to the alleys is going to kind of, have a bit of a fallout here that has their, slamming themselves into buildings and dilapidated things that, fire escapes are going to fall down and people are going to have to start to scurry, and that these two kind of titans that are clashing are basically, again, bringing into... Right here we have the fire escape, are bringing in all these innocent people into their fray. So again, there's two people. I don't know whether they die or not, but again, it's just a matter of that everybody's caught into this, fight of these two weird guys that basically nobody knows what they're about or even why the battle's even coming here. The color of his skin, overkill, as you see, is like this gray color. Again, that was intentional so that when we came down to these schemes and we were trying to give a bit of a Frankenstein feel, that again, we wanted to give a color, an ash color to him, so he seemed like he was kind of dead, and it was, like what you would think at a morgue. He is bionic, he has a bionic eye, so Spawn, he's a smart man and he's a killer. Take out the electronics, and the way to do that is to shove, a piece of debris through the guy's eye. Again, it's I think an impactful way of kind of ending the battle again instead of just the usual way, and at the same time it's those things that you're never going to see in a cartoon show that people are either, like I said, going to be enthralled with or going to be really repulsed with. We had a scene here, I remember too, that the flames and the smoke was like really huge. That again, that was an edit that we made, that we didn't want the flames to look like it was engulfing the whole city, because then why wouldn't every single police and authority of the fire department be coming down, in droves into the back alleys? That we had to tone that down. Some of it, we either do it at the stage when it's overseas, or once we get it back, we do it in the editing stage where we cut out frames that we don't think quite fit, and we either intercept them with other ones, or we basically chop down the show so that maybe originally it might have been, let's say, a 25-minute show, that we cut it down to final edit maybe 24 minutes and 10 seconds, that we lose 50 seconds of things that we thought might not play story-wise into the whole production. We had to make sure that we tweaked the color of the green in his eyes, because I wanted to make sure that we didn't lose those in the shadows as he came down. We've got the point now where, again, we're starting to set in a kind of a domino effect here, where he's going to steal guns, because, again, as a trained killer, he knows where they keep the guns from 5 years ago. But that's going to basically set into motion this whole chain reaction that basically is going to have other people being caught up into his web of I guess it's this conspiracy of who's stealing guns and attacking the government, because ultimately the answer is, in real life, for every action there's always a reaction. And this is where, again, since we're setting up this web, this is where we're laying in all these pieces, that if a dead man steals guns from a U.S. government, that somebody is going to have to pay the price. And that it's going to basically now entangle both the woman he's trying to protect and his best friend, because, again, they're ensnared now in his actions. It's going to also come back to him that although he's trying to be human and he wants to be human, that he can't go around killing people and sticking them to walls, because, again, that's going to attract attention. So as you're trying to figure out the puzzle of your life, that maybe you should do it in a kind of a quiet, more mature fashion than sitting there saying, hey, what if I basically get human scarecrows and staple them to the walls all around me and sit on a pyre of body parts and then let me do my thinking. That's not very conducive to being a human being. And so, although throughout the show, you know, he wants those things that made him Al Simmons in the past, he's not doing really anything about it, you know. And again, here's again part of the start of that he's stealing guns here so that he can go and start killing people. And it's all the things that, again, Hal wants him to be, and the reason why that he was picked to be this hellspawn. It's that gray matter that we keep coming back to that says he's good and bad, and the ultimate answer is he ever going to break the deal with the devil? You know, I don't even have that answer, and I hope I don't have to give it for 50 years, because again, what's more interesting is the path along his quest for the Holy Grail instead of actually capturing that. Because again, if the Holy Grail was his goal, once you got it, then what do you do the next day? I mean, I guess you could polish it or something like that, but it's more interesting to try to climb the mountains and get through all the disasters and tell these cool stories of human pain and suffering than basically going, I got the cup and it's not quite as ornate as I thought it was, and to tell you the truth, it had a chip in it, and then, you know what, it's not even that big. I could buy something better at Kmart. So sometimes the hunt is far more interesting than the kill, and I think that we're just presenting the dilemmas here. One of the big decisions that we had to make when we came down to this and we sat around at HBO was, how were we going to treat the voices of each one of these characters, especially Spawn. He becomes, you know, again, a key part. The voice of Spawn is played by an actor by the name of Keith David, and it was one of the things that I had somewhat a personal bias towards, that the vast majority of the main players are actually people that are actors first, and not necessarily, you know, voice actors that basically do a lot of animated programming. The voice actors are very good for doing kind of background or throwaway characters, or people that, again, if you need 2 or 3 voices and you need somebody to be able to alter their, you know, their pitch or their tone, those guys are great. They can go from a young lady, you know, that sounds 16 to an old shriveled woman that basically has a German accent and sounds like she's been smoking, you know, 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So what I wanted was more of, instead of, I felt when I watch cartoons now as an adult that a lot of people just were reading these lines, and they were reading these lines in such a way that it was, they just had a script in front of them and they were recording it, you know, basically like I'm doing right now, and it came off kind of stiff. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to go towards people that had more acting experience, so that, again, there'd be a little bit more play in the way they did it. The interesting thing that we found that those that were the actors, that they were a lot more animated with their body when they were standing in front of the mic when we were recording, because they're used to moving their body and looking in the camera lens instead of just standing still and talking into a mic. The difficult side came in trying to coordinate their schedules, because, again, some of them were doing movies elsewhere, and we had to try and shift all these people around so that we could get them in and out of studio and get the people that we wanted. Originally, the voice of Cagliostro, which is Elijah Sage, was to be played by William Hurt, who was a friend of somebody that was in the production, but he ended up having a problem with his throat later on, and then his window closed because he had to jump on to go make a movie out in New York, and we ended up losing him. In place of him, we ended up getting somebody that I thought, you know, has he read more and more lines, got more and more into the characterization of Cagliostro, which is this old man, this kind of Moses character, that is this voiceover that you hear in the show, and that's played by Richard Dysart, who some of you might, you know, recognize as kind of like the head of, you know, the LA Law Show. He was the kind, gentle old man, and he's got this nice voice now that he can play these, you know, these lines and end them with these little cryptic sayings, you know, that give a sense of, you know, that there's something in the shadows out there, or something bad's going to happen. It's that kind of Vincent Price quality voice that comes with the character, so that, again, he doesn't have much emotion in terms of happiness, but he's kind of a matter-of-factly saying and reading to the audience this story of this book of the legend of the Spawns and how they go through it. The voice of Wanda was played by a young lady that again has done, you know, stuff for soap operas, and again had a lot, I thought, a little bit more bounce in some of the other voices that we were to bring in, and again, we've probably heard, I'd say I'd say originally we heard pretty close to a dozen voices for each one of the characters, and again, HBO had their own choices of what they wanted, and so did I, and again the directors, and we just kind of came to consensus that whoever they felt strong about, you'd maybe give them that voice in return for somebody else that you like. But overall, I think one of the strengths of the show, given that we started HBO animation from ground zero to bring this program out, and it was a learning process along the way, that one of the strengths that we have is in the voices and in the music and in the sound effects, and that we were, and the editing, became something that became stylistic, and that, I'm hoping that literally until they cancel the show, that we will continue to strive and grow and do better in a visual sense. But the voice of Spawn is played by, like I said, Keith David, and he has this voice on him that's really deep, and he can go into this, I'm Spawn, without sounding cartoony. Although, see, mine sounded cartoony, which is why I'm just producing that and I'm not acting in this thing. But his voice is, we wanted to have more of like kind of an animal voice to him. And sometimes when he kind of breathes and he does this, kind of a horrific riff on, let's say, Darth Vader, when he's trying to breathe and come to grips with what's happening with him, given that he's a burnt man and his lungs are kind of seared, that we had to convey that this is a voice of a man that basically is not quite human, although everything else still has to say that with him. And so that when he says those two words, that he has to have a drama to his voice without being, like I said, cartoony, so that it was we needed the voice of the guy that could actually say, pass the salt, in a way that you went, that you were like scared of him when you were passing him the salt, going, yes, sir. And you gave it to him. So his take on this character, again, it got further down the line, became stronger and stronger. Some of the other people that did the voices of, let's say, Garib and Sam, he's a guy, again, that people have seen as a stand-up comic, and Michael McShane that has been in enough TV shows that he's done enough of the characters that actually we had him set up. I correct myself. We had him set up to do Sam Burke. We ended up making him Twitch, which was actually pretty interesting because McShane is a man. If you see him, he's a mountain of a man. He must be, I don't know, he's got to weigh 320 pounds if he's an ounce, and he's just this big guy, and he's this cuddly, lovable guy that is really funny. Like I said, he's a stand-up improv comic, and we got him to do Twitch, and Twitch is actually the detective that weighs 97 pounds, dripping wet, with jewelry on, and we couldn't really get him into the voice that I wanted, which was kind of like this accountant kind of voice, until we got him to actually stop moving. Whenever he moved and he got animated, he got too bubbly, and I needed Twitch to actually be a character that, for the most part, was kind of this droll, kind of dry, talking, boring voice. And the only way we could get it, that I wish I could show pictures to people, is that McShane, this 320-pound mountain of a man, standing there, and literally he had to put his hands to the side of his body, stare straight into the mic, and put his feet together, and he couldn't move. And every time he moved, even if it was like a movement of his wrist, that all of a sudden his voice would change. And so we had to get him completely stoic so that we could pull the voice out of him. But once he got it, then again, he was trying to be fairly consistent with it. But he was a lot better doing like Garib, where Garib is like this drunk old bum in the back alleys, and he was able to do, again, some of his comedic voices that we were able to do that. Jimmy Keene, who is the voice of Tony Twist. When we were recording him, it was pretty humorous that he was the guy that cusses more than anybody else in the show by far, because he's the kind of the hot-headed mafia don that, when his hitmen get whacked out by Spawn and the overkill gets trashed, that he just kind of gets hyper. And especially in the first show, when he finds out the first kills come, that he has these long diatribes of cussing there that, again, people, I thought that it might be a little over the top, might even be a little offensive. But he pulls it off in such a way, and his voice, I think, is kind of funny, especially if you've seen Jimmy in person, that you know, he can sit there and go, you know, who whacked my man? Go get my win. And he can sit there somehow and go, fucking motherfucker, fuck. And you actually, instead of being offended by it, you actually laugh at it because he says it in such a way that it's so over the top that, again, that you're kind of getting into this guy just kind of deranged, and how's he even able to run, you know, this mafia cartel that's in the Boweries of New York. One of the things that we also put in here, again, because of the PG rating that we knew we weren't going to have, we were going to be on cable and it was going to be an R, was that we could start to show these adult themes. One of the ones, again, that people might be a little shocked at is, again, that we actually do show, you know, some nudity and sex. And here's an example of where we introduce Chapel for the first time, who is the assassin of Al Simmons, and he's in a sex nightclub here. And again, we didn't feel that we would do this stuff because it would be gratuitous or because we just wanted to have something there that we could, you know, easily suck the audience in. It was more that a guy like Chapel, who is this trained killer that basically does anything and literally cut his grandmother's throat for enough money, that he would hang around these scummy, sleazy bars across the world in between assignments, and these are the kind of places he'd frequent where there'd be drugs and alcohol and the thick smell of smoke rancid out in the air. And so we just want to present that, you know, again, you know, mafia people cuss, so we cuss, and as trained assassin people go to places where most of us wouldn't even think about going, and a guy who's back from the grave would hang around the alley, and we're just trying to present all these people in places that are kind of, you know, environments that are conducive to their character. Again, there was a movie called Blue Velvet. That was a David Lynch movie that I think is kind of disturbing to some people, but it shows the side that we have in every city, that although we don't like to acknowledge that it exists, it still is out there. We just don't come close to it as the average person walking the streets.
Don't like a lot of down.
One of the other voices that we had in there was Ronnie Cox, again, another actor. He does the voice of Macmillan and little Billy Kincaid, who's his son. Again, as a movie star, you know, he was able to bring that quality to the screen, where instead of just reading the lines and coming across kind of, you know, stiff and not much emotion, that he was able to, you know, flesh out the character with what he was saying and give a sense of nervousness or paranoia or even anger in the way that he did.
Hey, asshole. You got a
The
fucking
clown,
problem?
who is also one of the big characters easily in this show, is got a voice that we wanted to get, that although early on in the show he becomes kind of humorous and fun, that as it goes further and further down the line, that we also get him being more maniacal and things start to get really weird. And again, the weirdness comes in, again, it seemed like here that I think you get a lot of different emotions here. Here's Chapel taking a lady and upstairs and bedding her, and as they're having a bit of a time, you know, we transgress from the fan spinning in the room to the helicopter as he goes and does flashbacks of his, you know, killing of people and potentially killing Al. And see, right now, and he's thinking of two things at once. So again, is it pain or is it pleasure that he's thinking of as he's going through these emotions, even though the triggering device is him ultimately, you know, being at the strip club and just taking, you know, potentially one of the employees upstairs just for a 20-minute fling here. Billy Kincaid, which again, like I said, is played by Ronnie Cox doing the voice, is the kid killer in the show that basically has eluded the authorities up to this point. Here we are establishing the tools of his trade, just to show that, again, I mean, maybe it's hypocritical on my part, but, you know, I don't think that it's bad to show Chapel at a sex club, but I think it is somewhat going over the top by showing that Billy Kincaid, who kidnaps these young children, that he also basically mutilates them before he dumps their bodies. I don't think it's necessary to show the mutilated bodies of the children, and we've done that all off screen.
Billy Shakespeare, meet Billy Kincaid. Both great artists whose works will live on forever.
He waits, as they all do, for a sign, a warning,
something to set events in motion. Few warriors realize.
As we continue on here, we also play in with some of the themes that you'll see that Spawn hangs around, like the cross here. And again, it's just my way of throwing in that
the domino
notion that although he's trying to deal with these personal feelings, that he's still tied to this big biblical story of Armageddon, even though he's trying to stay away from it. So this is just us trying to be clever and do something that's kind of arty-farty here. That as he's thinking about his wife spinning the ring on his hand that he pulled from his grave in episode number 1. That we also get that let us not forego the big conclusion that the clown who's also in the background pushing him has the upper hand and trying to turn him into this guy that's going to be a general for Hell's Army. Again, we augment that with, again, this to me is like one of the better scenes that we have here with Tony Twist with his great voice here, where, he just tells the guy to shut up, and he talks in ways, again, that I think a mafia guy would talk, that he's now in trouble with Rome, and that he has to go back and beg their forgiveness with overkill, and he's telling this guy that he needs to basically get down on his hands and knees and go there and kiss their ass and basically make sure that he doesn't have any more troubles, because again, you want to make sure that the cartel doesn't start to squeeze you out because he's out of a job. At the same time, though, as you're trying to get the forgiveness over in Rome, he still has to try and figure out who it is that even took Overkill out in the first place. So, as he says right here, he's got a tits and a fucking ringer. That's exactly the situation he's in, and that he has to try and get out of those. The meeting place again here is in the auto wrecking, away from the city. We wanted to make sure that again they have these secret meetings. If they're again, you don't want to have everything in an office. We do enough of that with Jason Wynn. So you try to create these places where it'd be natural for these people to get together, so that when they're having their conversations, you don't keep showing a guy in a desk and a window, because otherwise you could have Wanda as a lawyer there, you could have Terry doing his desk jockey job doing that, you could have Jason Wynn, and you could have Tony Twist in an office. So you try to present them in different environments, like houses or secret meetings or under bridges or at discotheques or something like that, so that you're not just playing on the same look. And it also confuses the audience, because in terms of storytelling, you want to try and show as many different setups as possible, so that they know that they're going from one part of town to the other. If you go from a dark office and have a Tony Twist in it, and then you cut to Jason Wynn in a dark office, unless they're having a direct telephone conversation, you need to separate those two environments so that you go, oh, okay, I'm now someplace different, and potentially time has passed.
Yeah.
The scene that we're looking at right now is our first introduction to the existence of heaven on earth. And so heaven to me is a lot more subtle in terms of how they present themselves amongst the humans, where again the clown is fairly obvious, not only in terms of his looks, because he's this little fat dwarf, and he has the kind of painting on his face, and he would stick out in any crowd. That the angels, which is what we're looking at here, this is Angela, who's one of the reigning Spawn hunters, that she basically looks like any other woman that would be walking down the street, that again is 6 feet tall and just looks like she came off Cosmopolitan. But their existence looks a little more natural, and they're a little more incognito in terms of letting people know that they're even on the planet here. You'll see that in the fight here, we wanted to show really quickly the sense of her power really fast. So we do some quick double cuts, some editing. We do some negative shots of him when he gets his face pounded into the wall, so that we try to bring, besides in sound effects and in the music, if we can tie those two things in that are really easy. If you do a big hand clap, you can get people to jump, but can you also get them to jump a half an inch taller if you do a quick cut, so that it becomes the equivalent of when you have a calm in the storytelling, that you have like a hand jump out from a grave that we call, we dub it the popcorn moments, that if you're watching it at a theater, that it makes you kind of bounce your popcorn on somebody else's lap because you get that little nervous jolt here. We haven't really followed up in terms of the existence of heaven in these first 6 episodes because, again, we wanted to keep it a lot more earthly, and, this is more of a setup for potentially the 2nd season. But, again, we just wanted them to play here that heaven is aware of hell's activities and that this hell spawn that exists is being watched by the eye of those that are basically wearing the good hats. Because Al Simmons does come from the pit of hell and he is a spawn, and that the spawns throughout time have generally been these evil, vicious people that embrace the curse that basically gives them the power so they can wreak carnage on the world. Spawn is looked upon by heaven as basically purely black and purely evil, and they don't see any of the gray matter. So they're having a discussion right here where Angela says, "Let me take him out," and that's the end of the conversation. And so she doesn't know any of the background, where the guy's only back because he wants to get back to his wife and he wants to lead a normal existence, and he's kind of sad that he can't have a child, and his best friend's remarried. And so those are some of the layers we're putting in here where, again, everything isn't quite what it seems, or isn't the stereotype that we would like it to be, that there is gray matter in all forms of whatever theology that we're putting up in here. Once we present those ideas and we come back to, again, trying to ground the stories, where, again, here's Wanda as a lawyer getting the information from Max that has tapped into some data bank to get some of the information from Washington, D.C. that basically perpetrates them as covering up maybe the murders of these children, and that there's some kind of connection between the CIA and those dead reporters and the death of these children, although nobody's actually put it all together. But Wanda now trying to get her client not only off the hook because she feels that he's being framed, she's also basically getting herself tangled into something that's getting deeper and deeper and deeper, and the heat's getting turned up anyways because by Spawn's existence, dead bodies are starting to litter the alleyways, and so anybody that gets close to this is going to be instantly in danger of being caught up in the same groundswell. When we got the visuals back from Korea, again, one of the things that really we had to make a statement was we had to lay in a sense of style to this whole show. One of the things that we did was we tried to eliminate some of the things that we didn't like I was saying earlier, where you cut back from maybe 25 minutes to 24 minutes. But in terms of editing, the director of the show, Eric Radomski, whose past experience included, Batman, the animated show, and the actual Batman animated show that was on TV. So he was used to dealing with shadows and dark, but we wanted to make sure that we could ramp this all up a little bit, more intense. But I remember we had the conversation one time where they said that a half-an-hour show takes 1 or 2 days to edit, once you get it back from overseas. And maybe it was more of my seeing, some things that weren't quite as dark as we wanted, we had to send it back. Or when we did get it, that I saw that we were going to have to be a little clever with it, that I go, no, to me, I see that this thing is going to be like a 10-day edit. And at the time, a couple of them laugh going, it's 2 days, Todd, not 10 days. But it was amusing that, like, on the first show, 14 days later, the edit was done. It adds a lot of the style to our show, so that, again, you have this kind of MTV quality, video quality to it that, again, I think our Generation X and those just are kind of hip. They get, that you can do quick cuts that sometimes when I run in with Hollywood people, they have a tendency that you have to explain everything to the audience. And part of what I think is intriguing with the show that we try to present is that you want the audience to not know all the answers, and that you want them to discover the answers at the same time as Spawn, so that when you get this imagery, the answer is that it doesn't make any sense because that's what Spawn's feeling, and that he doesn't know how all the pieces fit together. And you want the audience, on some level, I believe, to kind of to grow along with Spawn. Now, in the stuff with, let's say, Wanda or with Jason Wynn, you can be a lot more pragmatic and tell those stories in a linear fashion. But for Spawn, I think that he's hitting the ground and he's confused, and I think we need to keep the audience confused with him. So as he kind of comes into play, you'll see earlier there when he was doing the gunshots, we do a lot of, you know, quick cuts where, again, you have double hits of sound, you have dramatic lighting effects, you have, you know, 3 or 4 times where we go negative. You play with the volume of the effects as Cape hisses around, and you get all those pieces together while he's still screaming at the same time, what's this all about? And then you have the clown come in there and do a bizarre act. And all of those things add into, I think, some of the things that make the show intriguing in terms of that people want to come back to each show, you know, week in and week out, or they want to get dragged along like a good espionage story, that if we do our job right, at the end you'll have all your answers, or at least you'll get the answers that are necessary so that you can go, oh, okay, I can kind of put a period on the end of the sentence here. Another thing that you can add to it that gives some strength to the overall product is the music. Shirley Walker, that did the scoring for this show, we brought her in from the outside. She had experience with movies. I think her last show she had done before she jumped onto ours was Escape from L.A. with Kurt Russell. And so she'd lived in that world before. And we wanted to have, again, a movie quality to it, so that, again, like I said, since people do bring these stereotypes to the show, because it is animated, that we give them real actor voices, we give them, you know, real kind of mafia dialogue and real CIA dialogue, and we give them music that isn't cartoon music, so that it's like dun-a-dun-a-dun, and you're going to go, oh, yeah, okay, I've heard that 1,000 times, that we're going to play it in a way that you would play a movie. Some of that meant that, if you pay attention to it, that we actually turned the volume down and we just let the sound effects and the dialogue actually play it all out. Here's an example again here of the clown coming back. If you notice that his marking on his face is now black, because we're up to show 4. Early on it was blue, and again, I didn't think it worked. So by the time I was able to correct it, it took us 4 shows to get to that point. But now we're doing some of this weird imagery in here where we do like negative flashbacks. We're just trying to convey, again, with lightning and bats and rain, all those kind of cool, you know, simple B horror movie attitudes that we bring into the show that give that atmosphere. Going back to Shirley, if she can somehow tie all of that together with her music, then again, I always felt that the show, you know, if you analyze each one of the parts, it wasn't quite impressive, but, you know, I always thought that what's kind of successful with Spawn is that the whole becomes better than the parts. That, you know, the animation isn't the best, and maybe the dialogue isn't the best, and maybe, you know, the designs aren't the best. But if you put them all together and included the music, include the sound effect, that 1 and 1 and 1, instead of adding up to 3, adds up to 4.5 or 5, so that, again, you get into the whole package, and you're not worried about separating each one of them out. And that even though there might be a glitch, let's say, visually, when you're looking at something, so, again, you might go, that was kind of a bad upshot of, you know, Twitch there. You know, you don't quite believe, you know, the animation of Sam's, you know, smoke coming from a cigarette, that we still had, again, the whole ambiance was put together in such a way that you just kind of get sucked up into the flow of it, and you don't literally worry about the small details that we have. Again, with Sam and Twitch here, we're in their office. You can do things like when you cut to photos on the wall, you can cut to him smoke. It's like a lot of guys smoke. I mean, I don't smoke myself, and I'm not here to endorse it. It's just kind of a cool thing because, you know, besides it gives you a neat dramatic lighting, especially if you're out in the dark, you can play with the swirls of the smoke cutting in front of people's eyes when they're saying something, you know, that needs to be, you know, kind of intense. And it just gives a sense of 3D, too. Given that we're dealing with a two-dimensional product here, because this is flat, unlike comic books, it is, you know, the only difference is that it's moving, where I have to pick still shots in the comic books, that the way that you can give the illusion of 3D is to have things kind of cut in front of things in the back, and so we call it, you know, a foreground, middle ground, and background shot. And if you give these different planes so that you go, oh yeah, okay, something's close to me, something's medium to me, and something's far from me, then you give a sense of depth. And all those things like cape swirling and hair blowing and smoke, coming around a guy's face, all of that can give the illusion that things are not just being drawn on a flat plastic cell and we call it animation. One of the other things that HBO wanted to try and pull off too is that, again, because they do have this old audience, that they wanted to see if we couldn't, combine all the mixture of all these things and present these characters and design them in a way that, although they're, I guess you could say they are cartoony to a certain extent, but we wanted to keep their designs close to the, the ones I had in the comic book without getting too far. I have a tough time believing that if you do something like Fritz the Cat, that is basically talking, bunnies, but they're talking about adult things, that you still have the unbelievable thing of saying, well, I've never seen a talking cat. And what we're trying to convey here is are things that become a lot more real. Here's a shot here that, again, for the boys, they get to see the little flesh here. Boom. Again, this is again a scene to interrupt myself. That this is a scene here. Nice hippo mouth there again on Tony, but where they just come in. Here's the bad guys. They just break into each other's houses, and they just basically annihilate whoever it is that they feel is expendable to kind of get their message across. This is also the cap of earlier when they were out at the car wreckage place, when they were having to talk about going to Rome and making sure everything comes out okay, that the CIA are keeping tabs on the mafia, although the mafia is in bed with the CIA, and that Jason Wynn now comes back here saying, you better make sure that you stay under my thumb. And by the way, we've just intercepted this package of your boy. We thought you might be interested because you're in trouble. And he drops the box, he walks away. And again, without showing it, because it's all done off panel, the actual killing, that we actually then get the end result. And we see here, as we pull away slowly, with some nice music, that we get, there's the boy that he sent to get his apology. And now we know that Tony is not in a very good stead with Rome. The character designs, like I said earlier, there's a fine line between doing cartoons and then making everybody look like their body beautiful. So one of the things you want to try and do is create these characters in such a way that they look like people that if you stand on a street corner in the downtown of any big metropolis, that you can actually see these people to a certain extent. That, Wanda's well-groomed. We have Max here, who's a little bit disheveled because he's the private detective. Sometimes you bring in some of your own personal stereotypes that people like. The detective, one guy's fat, one guy's skinny. That's more to do a little bit of a Laurel and Hardy take on Sam and Twitch. Because, again, I know that we're dealing with, a man back from the grave and, a guy who's dead and lots of killing and a lot of espionage. And you don't want to paint this whole thing completely black and cryptic so that when you're done watching it, you feel like slitting your wrist. So you have to intermingle these weird things like the bum's, weird sense of humor, the clown kind of being, maniacal, and then Sam and Twitch kind of having their little personal conversations back and forth to each other, that they're just kind of poking each other and giving you a bit of a laugh here and there and just taking the edge off this show so that, again, you're not completely heavy and feel like you got a 20-pound weight on yourself when you get it. Overall, like with all the things that I try and do with Spawn, the essence is just trying to keep the attitude there where, again, the movie, it's tough to have like the cape, which defines him both in the show and in the comic book, that the character, to people who know the character, they go, that's Spawn, the guy with the cape, because the cape is alive and the whole costume becomes that. As you play to the strengths of each medium, and again, here's a place where we can do these flashbacks, and we can distort the imagery there, and we can blur some of it. We can do this kind of heat effect, like again, that it's hot in hell. We can superimpose here. So he's having this weird nightmare. We can bring in some textures, and we can, overlap some of the design stuff that we do. that we can give this whole weird sense of him. And again, we do a nice negative shot there that he wakes up and then he's back in the alleys. But again, we just went from this red hot place called hell to him snapping out of his dream, and he's back in the alleys where it's dark, and you'll notice the colors are now mostly blue and gray, and they're cold colors. Again, the color becomes
Another nightmare.
very important in terms of you put grays in there, and you can convey a sense of cold iciness, and that it is kind of a bleak world that they live in, and that when you go to other places like Wanda's house and you turn on the lights, or it is the sun's out, then all of a sudden things don't seem quite as scary. If you watch a good like Alfred Hitchcock movie, and somebody's being chased in the rain in an abandoned building or something like that by the stalker, that as soon as it cuts away from the lightning and the dark night to daytime, then you always know that you can relax your heartbeat, because you know that none of the cool stuff or the killing's ever going to happen at 12 noon, and you can kind of have a bit of a reprieve, where most of the stuff, in the good stories that we tell, is going to happen once everybody's in bed and you got the 8 million individuals sitting back sleeping. Here we have Spawn, again, still trying to just say, I just want my space and I want my peace, and he's now basically turning away one of the bums. The reason he lives in the alley is because, again, he is this monster and he can't regenerate any skin. And the only people that basically accept him on some level are the bums. Now, the wise old sage is coming up to him here, basically saying to him that you're basically turning away the only people that are giving you a chance. If you were to walk out in the middle of the street right now, that those that are supposed to be kind of normal, if you will, would shun you as a freak, but those that are the losers of the world, the bums, the homeless, those that we think that have no redeeming value, they're the only ones that can somehow find some compassion, that can basically say, here, you can join us, we don't care, we all have problems, we don't care what you look like, we don't care what your story is. So again, it was a theme that I wanted to play on, that in some situation, just like I think I can get, Mother Teresa to pull the trigger on a gun, I also think that I can show that the people that we believe to be, again, the dregs of society, could be more human and more humane towards another person than somebody who maybe is a bank teller or works on Wall Street or thinks that they're, far more compassionate, although they would look at Spawn and say, he's a freak, let's get out of here. Again, we show the time counter, so just to give a sense of building up that he's slowly draining these powers, and that somehow he needs to be able to kind of pick them up or find other ways to basically get through these situations, because he's slowly going towards the devil. When we sat down to do storyboards, one of the other things that we looked at is we wanted to choose camera angles that, again, we're more conducive to movie making instead of cartoons. Cartoons generally are, set the two people up and then do head cut, head cut, head cut, head cut. And we wanted to try and play again with shadows and try and do what they call, Hollywood haircuts, which is the shot you just saw before, where, again, you cut people at their foreheads, and you cut right there. Here's a shot right here where you cut them at their forehead and you move them up into a corner. And you again show a guy like here where we call that Dutching the camera, where you tilt the whole scene so that, again, it looks a little bit off balance, and you just don't go in for the straight shots, and you give a sense of, you can play with a little bit of, vertigo with these things. Again, here's another Dutch shot that, again, is just a more fancier way of presenting the idea that you got to establish that the cops are still in this police vehicle here, and that they're kind of trapped in there by the psycho killer here. That you can, there's ways to do it. You either come up, let's say, from the tire, and you go, up through the mag, and then you see the word police, and then you see the people in the car. That's a way to do it. You can come from the top of a building, and you can come down through, let's say, the wiring in between the buildings. You can come through the fire escape. You can have, rats jumping around. And there's 4 or 5 different ways I think you can kind of get in and establish scenes without just basically going, okay, put it on a straight horizon, and then present what it is that you're trying to see and walk away from it. Here's a scene here where we've got the boy here who can't talk, and we have this weird psycho. Again, it wasn't, by accident that he's got the perished clothes on, because again, we just, given that all this stuff has kind of got some weird biblical themes to it, we just wanted to keep trying to tie in all these threads so that, again, this tapestry that we're weaving, becomes fairly, succinct, and that it all kind of plays into each other. The little boy trips over Spawn, and now Spawn drifts back into the shadows. Again, it's conveying the sense of, the protector of the alleys, the king of the alleys, is just a ghost, and that he kind of comes and goes as he sees fit.
Somebody else want to play?
We've got, again, some guy walking around, dressed as a man of the cloth with weapons. Again, it's those weird psycho stories that you read of, like, Jeffrey Dahmer and that you just go, why do people want to, go out there and kill? I mean, there's a difference between murdering people and taking pleasure in it. And again, when you read these stories where, not only are people killed, but then, they're skinned alive, and then they're cut up into 20 pieces, and then they're, organized in alphabetical order, that you get into that weird twisted mind that it's like, this is way beyond just somebody on an impulse getting mad at somebody at a bar and going and pulling out their gun and pulling the trigger in a moment of rage or anger that they'll regret for the rest of their life. That you've actually got people who, take pleasure, and it becomes a skill in trying to kill people. Billy Kincaid, and in this instance, the Reverend here, although there will be a twist ending at the end of this, these are, like I said, these people that, I hate to say it, that exist in our society, and we just wanted to bring those to the forefront because, again, Spawn's world is not something that's really, fun to look at per se, but I think that there's a, look at that, yeah, cool blood, that we have all these things in here that, again, are real, and though they're tragic, we try not to make fun of them. So we don't belittle the thought that these kids are being killed. If anything, we're going to get more intense as we, come further and further into the show. And we're also, we keep presenting these ideas of Spawn, and like, how does he get involved in this? Is it his job to get involved, or again, as he keeps, flashing back, like right now, his only goal, his only reason for coming back is Wanda and his wife. And again, like I said, it's the theme that I would come back for, that I just would want to get back to those things that, gave me love, and not the things that gave me hate. But because he has this natural instinct, and he's becoming, literally the eye of the storm, he can't help, but, be caught in these things, some of which he triggers himself. Right now, he's, here's Spawn here, sitting there, he just wants to be quiet. He just wants to, do nothing ultimately. But again, he sees the Garib, one of the guys that's trying to befriend him, that, that isn't quite out to get him, is now getting some police brutality. So does he just, again, sit by and do nothing and go, it's not my problem, I've got my own? Or does he now sit here and act upon what he sees? So, this guy right here, although he's looking for the psycho killer in the priest clothes, he's being just as bad as the good guy. And again, it's like, the police, turning around, just shooting and hassling people at will. He's supposed to be protecting society, and instead he's out there basically using and abusing them. We get old Spawny coming up behind him, popping. Now these are the shell casings that come out of him. So this guy gets the fact that this guy isn't quite human, and it's like he's in trouble here. So the costume, again, is one of the things that's, doesn't make him Batman. But the costume is alive, and that, again, the cape basically is kind of like his hands, and the chain is kind of like a tongue, and the spikes are kind of like teeth. And that this thing is always in constant flux, and that the costume basically bounces and plays off his emotion. So when he's angry, the costume plays a lot more. Now here's Spawn again, like I said, that if you want to act like a man, then quit doing these horrific, monstrous, acts. That he takes this cop, although the cop is being bad, he now takes this guy and strings him up like a living scarecrow and walks away from him. It's not the kind of thing that's going to be very conducive to him basically getting a pardon from the 12th precinct when they come. because they're going to come looking for their buddy, and it's just going to bring more people into the alleys, and if it brings more people into the alleys, it's just going to they're going to hassle the bums. If they hassle the bums, things are going to get loud. If they get loud, Spawn's going to get pissy, and if Spawn gets pissy, he starts to act. And so he needs to still learn along the way, how to act in these situations, that basically you just can't basically knee-jerk your way through this. That you have to like take a double take and then go, maybe there's another way, to solve this. The answer is that that's the only way, and if that's how you get to that point, that's okay. But still, the thought has to be there. He needs to still put into him. Although in this show, and in this whole laser disc, he's still, in my mind, he's still a baby. He's only been spawned maybe for a week, and he's still learning all these things, and he doesn't know how to come to grips with it, and he still doesn't know the ramifications of all of it. And so the thing that is interesting for him right now is the fact that he has to basically put these pieces together and go, there must be a better way than just doing it right now. If you just saw right there was a scene there, one of the ones that kind of drives me batty when I get some of the stuff back, because I get, kind of anal about some of these things, that there was a shot of them driving down New York City, and there was like no cars or people on the road. Now, I don't know about you folks, but I've been to New York City, and those 8 million people, like, they just don't hide and scurry in the offices. There's a few of them out on the streets, and better than that, there's even taxis, let alone cars. And sometimes when we would send things overseas, we were trying to get a sense of claustrophobic that somehow got lost in the translation. That's why, again, we want to do middle ground, foreground, and background, and do a lot of black, so it felt like we were planting somebody in something that was kind of thick. But somehow in this big city here, again, if you look through this tinted window, you can see that, like, for some reason, there's, like, nobody parked on the street, and they're just giving us a wide berth to go through. Some of the details in terms of explosions and, the carnage that is caused by some of the activity of either Spawn or again, in this situation, the grenade exploding and things like that, with the police car. I felt that we could have, again, made it a little more, that again, instead of it like right here being a pit in the ground, that we could have, drawn it out so that the road was cracked more. Maybe that there were pipes that were broken, water mains were shooting up, and maybe electrical, things were severed so that lights were out in the area. But again, these are the things that, being somewhat an amateur when I started the whole process, that I assumed that they would take whatever it is that we gave them, the blueprints we gave and we sent overseas, and on some level they would basically upgrade everything. But I found actually that, for the most part, that they're afraid to change, because if they don't do it right, then they kind of get reprimanded. So the answer is they just kind of stick close to what you give them, or they get conservative and they go back. What about the we're now into our second season, and one of the things that I learned really quickly, just like I do with my other 7 businesses, is that, you just kind of put your thinking cap on for a while, you stand back, you watch how the pros do it, and then you basically take what you think works in a functional way, and then you put your own ideas into it. When I was first negotiating the deal with HBO, I didn't want them to basically go down the route of, let's say, a CBS or an NBC or something, and give them, a Saturday morning slot and say, hey, Spawn, we're going to put Spawn on Saturday at 10 o'clock in the morning in between Tasmanian Devil and, Space Ghost, and, since we don't want to be too offensive, let's make sure that he's not from hell, let's just call it Jersey, and let's make sure that we give him a talking dog so he can go, let's go, Spawn, I smell crime. And so I knew that if I wasn't, like, basically involved in this thing from the get-go, that it was like they were going to take my little kid and they were going to basically go off in a direction, and they were going to put it out there, and it was going to have a short shelf life, and it was going to be gone. So for me, Spawn is the equivalent, of a child, just a creative child. And just like my own children, that, I'd never give my children up for adoption, and especially not for no goddamn visitation rights, that, Hollywood has a bad attitude of taking these options and saying, here, little creative person, here's a nice little check with a couple zeros on it, we're going to take your child, and, don't ever bug us again. And luckily, because of my career in comic books, by the time that Hollywood got to me, you know, I think that the only two things that they can offer you is fame and fortune, and they were too late to give me either one of those because, you know, I could go to a comic book convention any day of my life and have people around the block, and I don't spend the money that I make. So what I needed from them was to create an audience and to get the brand name out there, but they had to do it in a way that I thought still kept, you know, the integrity and sophistication of it, and the only way of doing that was for me to stay at the top of it. So the deal with HBO was you can have this #1 property, and, you know, I think you should take the #1 property, because if you don't, then you're going to have to go to number 24, and if you're the kind of people who like to deal with the 24th best product, I'll go someplace else, but I need to be in charge of the product, and I need to be the boss of the show, which is, you'll see at the end, I get exec producer credit. That's the equivalent to boss man in TV land. And although I had no experience in animation, I knew what it was that I thought that the audience was going to have to still get and see, and what we had to keep in terms of mature themes across here. And so the deal was, if you want Spawn, I come attached to it, to my child, God damn it. I'm going to tell you how to dress it. I'm going to tell you how the hair is going to be combed. And maybe someday down the future, 20 years from now, when I think that Ospani is either outlived the old man, or I can hopefully get hit by a bus and I become redundant to the process, that again, he can live beyond me and go on his way to college and have a good life. But for right now, he still has a character and has a new entity and has a new brand name and is something that we're presenting to the public. He's something that I still feel I need to be stuck to in all facets, and because again, I don't think that they see the little subtleties of, again, putting Chapel sitting in shadows and sitting them off into the shadows and doing the fades the way that I think that we should be doing, and doing the dissolve. And luckily, you know, when we started HBO, there ultimately was no animation division. We went to outside sources, but again, the guys that we started with, they couldn't take the heat. They ended up quitting right in the middle of the process, and so we just said, screw it, let's just start our own division. HBO basically gave us the 41st floor, and we ended up basically putting the warm bodies in there, and we brought in people that at the time, animation, you know, is very competitive given that Disney and Fox and Spielberg's DreamWorks and everybody seems to be into trying to put out these kinds of product, that our only sell was, because we weren't going to have as big a budget as everybody else, we could only sell them this. We could only sell them the dark and the black and the coolness of it, because we couldn't match them basically in terms of paycheck. And you'll find that there's a lot of creative people in the animation business that are getting sick and tired of drawing unicorns and little frogs with bow ties on it, and that they're just waiting to get their teeth sunk into something, and that was our sell, you know? So when we went up to people that we were looking for, we went, you know, I know that, that Disney's going to pay you maybe 40% more than we can, but you can do our show, and we say, fuck. And so, you know, that was actually our selling point. And so we actually got a lot of people going, finally, we can do something that has a little bit of balls to it, that again, that is a little bit more orientated to a crowd that is over the age of 5 and doesn't have to appeal to mom. And essentially, like I said, it's just bringing over some of the sensibilities from Europe and Japan that have been ongoing literally for years and years and years and years and years. So once we put, you know, the team together, it was just a matter of us then sitting in a room, going over the storyboards, going over what we wanted to accomplish style-wise, going over how we wanted to edit this project, going over how we wanted to design and what kind of colors we wanted to present, what kind of stories we wanted to tell, that layered in the whole, you know, mythical and biblical themes that we are trying to present here, and trying to bring in the mafia elements and the CIA element, and stringing these things all together so that somehow, in some weird fashion, it all comes together while we mix in the bizarre. And so again, just like a good Dave Lynch movie, you know, or Jacob's Ladder, which had this weird feel to it, you know, we're trying to present those kinds of things. So here's now a meeting to bring in one of those moments where we have Billy Kincaid, the kid killer, meeting the little fat dwarf, and he's saying, you know, that he's a big fan of his, and he's been watching his activities, and he's kind of pumping the guy up. We call that's the equivalent in Hollywood of a schmooze, and there's plenty of those guys. And so this is our hellish schmooze here, and he's just trying to basically, you know, turn, again, since he's the guy that's supposed to try and make Spawn look bad, he basically just gave a tip here to say that this is where Cyan is. Cyan is Spawn's wife's new child from her new marriage. The name Cyan, C-Y-A-N, is the color of blue, and it's also the name of my child. Again, going back that you just draw from your own experiences, that, you know, Wanda is named after my wife. Cyan, the little girl, is named after my girl. Al Simmons, the character of Spawn, is named after a former roommate of mine that I played college baseball with, who now works for me and goes around the country in costume and doing a pressing of the flesh. Terry Fitzgerald, the best man, Spawn's best friend that's now married to Wanda. He's my right-hand man at my empire. I'm trying to think who else we have in here. That, I mean, essentially, you know, I found out early in the game that if you don't name the characters after your friends and families, you know what, the competition never will. So the only way you're going to get Uncle Fred in there is if you do it yourself, because last time I checked, I didn't think Viacom's going to do it for me. So I have to try and push this myself. So again, it just becomes something that is a little kind of tribute to those that, you know, have helped me along the way, but at the same time, you know, kind of immortalizing them. The funny thing is that as time goes by, you just, you know, these characters are those names that people who now know the real people that I work with, when they see their names or they hear their names on TV, that they kind of giggle or they go, wow, that's cool, your name's up there. So I had, you know, again, some of my wife's friends over the other day, and they were watching some of this, and it was somebody said, Wanda Cyan, which again is my kid and my wife, and they both were so proud that, like, Wanda was, like, now famous. My Wanda was now famous because she's been immortalized on TV. And, you know, somewhere along the line, besides just doing the work, you know, you have to get some fun out of the project in different veins, and those are the ways you do it, that you just, you know, you get your chuckle someplace else, because otherwise, you know, again, these were two women that it's tough to sit there and say, oh yeah, by the way, let's sit down and watch it as I decapitate this guy and watch Chapel do a doggy style with, you know, Mrs. Porno there. You know, those are the kind of things that don't really impress them all that much. You know, once they get by those things and they kind of just get into the whole flavor of what's going on, then ultimately, like I said, then the moms, you know, once they let the sphincters relax just a little bit, then I think that, you know, there's a tendency for them to be able to get into it. Given that we've also got adult themes here, one of the things that I'm also controlling is that part of the deal that I made, that I control merchandising rights to this show, as well as the merchandising for the live-action movie, and obviously just controlling the trademark and copyright. That one of the things that I think that I have to do to stay true to, that when I was arguing negotiations to maintain merchandising rights, both for the movie and TV, that the lawyers felt that I was being greedy by trying to get the license so that I could go out there and make $1 million off it or something. And I had to argue that it was quite the contrary, that if I gave them, just like if I give up my creative child, I don't think that they'll dress it right. That if I let them control the merchandising, then I think that all of a sudden not only am I going to see Spawn on, you know, a cool T-shirt or a cool hat, but potentially I might see him, you know, in a Color Forms book, or I'm going to see him on pajamas, or I'm going to see him on bedspreads, and to protect it. You know, again, the argument was that I don't need the merchandising because I'm greedy. I need the merchandising because they are greedy. And to offset costs sometimes when you're doing a show, you know, it's like, well, let's make this little, you know, toothbrush with the glow-in-the-dark Spawn head on it, that it's like I have to protect the integrity of this character, because ultimately everything has a shelf life, even this show to some degree, and the only thing that I see that's going to live throughout the, you know, the years is going to be the comic book. And Batman and Superman have been around for over 50 years. I got to go back and look at those people in the eye, and I don't ever want to look at them saying, you know, sorry about that little Fruit of the Looms Batman shorts that look like some guy that, you know, was drawn by a 4-year-old, but I wasn't in control of that it was more important to me to control it. And because I control it, we can do these cool shots here. Look at this, where the guy get pasted right in the head. Now, I'm telling you, just good, clean fun, Mom. Just if you sit back and you just watch the show, because let me tell you, if we let the moms of the world control us, we'd never even have Three Stooges, because it's too violent, because they poke each other in the eyes, and we sure as heck wouldn't have boxing. So luckily, we don't let the moms control us all the way through. Here's a scene here, again, where we're able to bring in some of the violence, but it's done in such a way, again, that appeals to the Generation X mentality, that again, that we've got this killer here, that is trying to bring a kid down. It's a mute kid, and our guy Spawn somehow, maybe not in the perfect manner, but he's in the way, he comes in here and saves the day in a way that does leave a bit of death and a bit of destruction behind, but at least the boy is now saved and can go back to his family, and we have somewhat a bit of a happy ending to the whole content here. And in hindsight, we also get, again, our bizarreness, where the guy that was shot through the head, that might be, somewhat hard for Mom to swallow, it actually is just, look at this, it's a little fat dwarf, so it was just a trick. So, and there's his skin laying there again, it's just cool imagery. And now the little guy leaves down the hall, and again, he has a great little laugh. I also do in the if you ever saw it on TV, I do like these intros at the beginning, this Rod Serling / Walt Disney, Alfred Hitchcock beginnings, and one of the last things I say in each one of the intros at the end is, now turn off the lights and watch Spawn. And I actually believe that the show plays completely different if you watch the show at like 11 o'clock at night or at midnight when it originally aired, and you turn off all lights around you, you send Mom up to bed, and you send, the little kids, in the house to bed, and you just stay there yourself, and you make sure there's no distractions, the phone's not going to ring, and that, somebody's not going to come in the door. And if you turn off all the lights, then what it does is, because we have so much black in the show, that the only light then emanates from your TV screen, and that all the negative space that we have out here then gives you the shapes that you're looking for. I always find it, again, there is a reason why when you go see a movie, they lock you in a room and they turn off the lights so that you're like projecting onto the picture and you don't get distracted by other things. I don't understand why when people don't watch TV and movies, when they bring them home, they don't like it like that. I know I drive my wife crazy that I don't care if we're watching like, Little Mermaid. When I put it in and I'm watching TV, I want like everything shut down. I want the curtains closed, and I want to get into theater atmosphere, because I think that what happens is you get more focus in the story and you don't get distracted. I mean, if you guys all remember when the VCRs first came out, that again, since people couldn't afford them and they were kind of expensive when they were on beta, remember you used to rent a movie and there'd be like 20 people go and watch, so that again, you could split the $5 20 ways, tightwads that we were, and that you'd sit there, and then all the way through this movie, you'd have like 50 people asking you, if you want popcorn, I gotta go to the break. Anybody need any coffee? Hey, Herman, what about this? Did you hear what Mildred's doing? And it drives me crazy that thank God that, electronics are cheap, because I don't like inviting the neighbors over, because I just like to get tunnel vision when I'm watching it. And I think that this show is one of those things that I think it's conducive to watching late at night with no lights, because you don't get distracted by any outside influence, and you can just go, this is just this bizarre little world, and I buy it for, 24 minutes or whatever, each episode is, or in this case, strung together for over 2 hours into this episodic kind of feel. And that, again, you get past the illusion that this is a cartoon, and that, again, since it is a cartoon, we're already fighting against those stereotypes, that we just need to bring in the things that would happen in an R-rated show. So, for instance, like I said, in Japan, they would do Die Hard, but they would animate Die Hard. The great thing about that is you never have to worry about paying Bruce Willis $20 million when he wants to do the sequel, and you can save yourself a lot on the budget. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you can't create these themes and give these atmospheres and these moods that, again, like I said, that it just drives me bananas that, Mom just thinks that because it's a cartoon that somebody can't say poo-poo tata out of their mouth. Again, we've got the little kid kidnapped here, and we fade to black. And again, look at that. We go into the black limo. Woo, wasn't that clever of us? That we try to do these little things here. Here's a scene here where you can move, again, the foreground element like it, let's say 3 seconds, or 3 frames a second, and then you move the back element at maybe 2 frames a second, and so that you give the illusion that things are moving at a different tempo. And again, you can create that whole thing that I believe that there's, again, some depth to this, given that we're doing, flat storytelling. Here it is, we're going to have another secret meeting. This one, again, will not be at the auto record. We're going to go someplace else, that it's like, we're going to go to where the helicopter is going to come landing on a dry dock, and this guy is now, pissed off here because, again, he's been kind of sabotaged on his way to a secret party, and the government's going to now come down here and it's going to say, it's time for us to get our shit together because we've got this thing, something's happening in the alleys, it's stealing my guns, and because it's stealing my guns, it's wrecking my international, dossier files with these people, and I'm having a tough time basically influencing people that I can do things when I can't even keep, my own house in a tidy fashion. So let's just tighten up all of this, and at the same time, I want to make sure that I don't have any mold within the ranks. So this conversation here amongst Wynn and the senator, although he's controlling Senator McMillan like a puppet to some extent, something's gone wrong, and he's going to accuse him of basically kidnapping Cyan, because again, it's it's your son, it's your bastard son Billy, and why all of a sudden did he appear in a place that he'd had no idea where Cyan was at? Then the answer is, as we saw previously, that it was our good little boy, the clown, and the clown is the one that keeps putting the knife in and keep turning it, so that again it makes the character of Spawn, the new guy, the new recruit from Hell, look like a fool, so that someday the clown in his true form as the Violator can go back down there and say it should be us, it should be the locals are the ones that basically should be controlling the planet and should be running Earth and should be calling the final orders when the day of judgment comes down and we get to face, the gates of heaven and try and potentially burn them down. Senator McMillan then ends up leaving here. Nice little silhouette shot. Again, those are easy ones to pull off. Again, so that again you can save yourself your animation. If you save yourself some time by doing some quick little tricks, again, people forget that black is a color and it can become your friend. And that, when you're dealing with budgets and you're dealing with time constraints and you've got to get a show in, sometimes it's better off to kind of limit the number of movements you have on screen, save the money, do a pan with the camera, use the background as your friend, because again, you just have to paint this lush background, which again will be more elaborate as we, learn all these lessons, or at least I do, and then you save the money so that when you get to the big money shot, which is the one that people go, wow, did you see that scene in episode 6? And you see that shot over there? I mean, it's the stuff that you basically remember in movies. There's 4 or 5 times that you just go, wow. And you walk out of there and you forget the details in between and you leave with those moments. And there's a way to do that in animation that you just be clever, again, with what you're moving, how you're moving it, what colors you're putting there. Can you cheat? Literally, the trick is to cheat, but also cheat in a way that you call it style. And that, I mean, I hate to say it, but I've made a whole career of that in comic books. I found a way to basically get through my deadline so that I'm not completely burying myself and burning myself out, both emotionally and physically. And the kids come up to me and they go, wow, Todd, that shot of Spawn jumping over the city was really cool, man. And the answer is that it was like his body in shadows, so it was like 90% black. I didn't even have to draw anything. He had a big cape covering 90% of the city behind him, and I cropped the panel behind him so that maybe if you're lucky there's only 12% of it that actually was building, but they think he was jumping over New York and there was only maybe 2 square inches of New York City. But God bless them if they consider that to be style, because then you can actually get through these deadlines and keep moving forward. And like I said, be strong for the battle and go again. And because again, when you're fighting with all these things, trying to present your ideas in a way when you're going against people that have preconceived notions, then again it becomes a bit of a war. And the only way you can win these wars is if you're strong. And again, if you want to get answers from people, then you have to take drastic terms. So here's Spawn. And again, he needs some answers. So like you or me, that maybe we'd send like a nice telegram. This guy's more practical about it, that he's going to hang this guy upside down on the 42nd floor of his penthouse. Has the blood now rushing to Tony's head. And he gets threatened by what he needs to get out of him. It's amazing how quickly Tony will give him the advice that he needs, and we can cut to the next one and Spawn's on his way. So on some levels, he's more pragmatic, because again, if he had a nice little talk with him instead of trying to, have tea and crumpets with him and get the answer, it might take 10 minutes. I bet you got that thing, as we just saw, in about 8.4 seconds, and this man is more about like getting the job done and moving on. Here we have Twitch. Although one of the things we wanted to present with the detectives, Sam and Twitch, and again the reason I call him Twitch is because he's a sharpshooter. So we haven't said the line yet, but it's the one where they go, "Why do they call you Twitch?" And the answer is, he says, "Because I don't." And so again, although he looks like a geek and he looks like a bit of, somebody that you might think to be more like an accountant, that he's actually the brains behind the two of them, and he can actually put the pieces together. And that Sam, the guy who likes to eat the donuts, is also a great detective, and that although they kind of joust amongst themselves when they're having their verbal, banter back and forth, that this is a scene where we actually go, they are great detectives, and they are piecing this all together. We're now getting scenes from the previous episodes that they're now going, we now know why the reporters are there, we now know why the killings are there. We still don't get, where Spawn's activities are, because they don't even know that he exists for the most part, but they're now seeing that there is a conspiracy and that there is a cover-up, and that now all of a sudden all these things are starting to converge so that we can have, yes, a climax, folks, because you need one of those, because otherwise you wouldn't be too happy at the end of this Laserdisc if it was a cliffhanger, now would you? So they're heading towards that right now, and we're going to, like I said, we're going to bring both the heaven and hell elements together, and we're going to bring the mafia, the espionage, the detective, and all those other things, and the kid killing thing, because again, little Billy Kincaid has Cyan, which is Wanda's kid, and so Spawn again has to come and somehow save the day. Again, given that we're dealing with those themes that moms don't quite like to, talk about, that, I just think that they're there because, again, although they, like I said, they can be kind of disgusting, it's like this guy, you want this guy to get his head popped off, but we haven't seen him do anything yet. And again, although we do have violence and it is on screen, it's weird, like I said, for some people to go, well, how come you draw the line with the kids? But again, if you go back and you take a show, let's say Cinderella, and you remember that show, that stepmother never laid so much as one finger on Cinderella, but I'm telling you, you were so worked up at her evilness that you wanted her, like Cinderella, to shoot her, So there's a way to actually show evil and intent without actually having to show the physical contact. So again, just like Cinderella, that couldn't go to the ball or got locked in, and you were going, shoot the mother-in-law, shoot it, give her a gun, somebody give her a gun, and do the violent thing. That you can still convey evil on a level that basically gets people to the point that you still go, Billy Kincaid deserves to die, because we now are intimating here that he's going to do something literally, that he shouldn't be doing. We do the shadows, we set the whole mood, we've shown some of his instruments, we've set him up in the past with what he does, and now things are starting to get out of play. Again, we can get into the whole situation where people can say that, this isn't my cup of tea. But again, I know that I've dealt with, censorship since I created this character. It's like, how stupid am I guess, on some levels to try and make hell palatable to the masses. But again, it's more of showing Spawn caught in all of these trappings here, that it's not about hell, it's about him fighting against it. But again, for the people that don't quite understand and don't get it, they argue that it shouldn't even be presented, that I shouldn't even be able to tell this story. And, again, that I'm endorsing satanic rituals and I'm, breaking the moral fiber of society. But to me, it's like I consider myself to be spinach, if we want to use a silly example, and that spinach isn't for everybody's taste. And so, you as an adult, or you as a person, or you as with family values or whatever else, all you can do is make the choices for your family yourself, and it's like, it's not for anybody else to do. So when you go shopping, if you don't like spinach, and your kids don't like spinach, and you don't think your kids should eat spinach, or your grandma should look at spinach, then just don't buy it. There's an easy solution to it. Just walk away from it. Decide not to pick it up and buy it. Nobody is forcing people to watch these ideas. Nobody's telling them to look at all these ideas. And although, just like in a grocery store, the world is full of different ideas, that although you're shopping with your child and you're going to be down in aisle 6 and you're going to be buying them the cereal with the lots of sugar on it, that it should be the grocery store's owner's right to still be able to have sugar for 5-year-old kids and have spinach for adults. And so to me, I'm just a green vegetable, and it's like some people actually like spinach and they don't mind that it's gritty even after you wash it and you eat it. So Now here we're getting to the climax here with the clown. It's all coming to a head. We got, look at this, like, because we're clever little writers, aren't we? That we've got now the CIA coming. We've got the cops coming. We've got to have a little bit of carnage here on the way to the showdown. That's pretty neat. There's clowns there. Spawn's gonna be there. Angela is on the outskirts, which is the view of heaven. So we're gonna pick her up, again in another season, and we're gonna get to the point to say, I wonder if little Cyan is gonna be rescued. Now, ultimately, you and I all know what the answer is, because again, it would be kind of a letdown at the end here if the little girl basically gets her head chopped off. And plus, then I wouldn't have little Cyan, and since it's the name of my kid, let me just tell you, my personal bias, my Cyan's not going to die. I'll let Joey next door, I can take him out because I don't have to live with him for the next 20 years asking me, Daddy, why'd you kill me? Daddy, why'd you kill me? So now here comes the cops here. We're going to have Wanda there. We're going to have Terry there. And this is where again, if you present all these ideas in a cool fashion, that if you take these risks with the show, which I think we've done here, or with some of the things, that I always believe taking the suicide trip is always far more entertaining. So it's the old, if you go down the path that's, less traveled, that I think that you have more of a chance to basically get further ahead in life. So for instance, if Spawn is kind of something that's stupid, and we're doing satanic things, and we're doing all these things that should fail, and that HBO is silly for even endorsing that, and it doesn't work, then it's like, you were meant to fail anyway, so if you do, then it doesn't make any difference if you lose, because everybody was saying, look at those guys, they're going 100 miles an hour towards that brick wall. They're dumb. What do they think they're going to do? This is never going to fly. Boom, you're dead, you failed, no big deal. Everybody thought you were going to lose. But here's where the key, this is where I can't seem to get too many people to join the ride with me. What if you take the suicide trip? Because, again, why go around the wall, right? Because you go around the wall, a million people go around the wall. But you want to tell a story? You take that car, you take that ride, and that ride is called Spawn right now, and you get in that with me, HBO, which luckily they have gotten in there, God bless them, and you get in that car and you go 90 miles an hour, and you hit that wall full steam. And here's the key, folks. You live to tell about it. Not that you die, but you live to tell about it because you got a success. You've got a story, because now they're going to talk about the psycho that went 100 miles an hour into the wall and walked away from it. It's a miracle. And in Hollywood, they call you a genius. So those things don't actually hurt when you got a resume and you're maybe trying to get more shows out of them, or you're trying to sell another idea to them, or you've got another creative child that you would like to raise in their present. And so it's those kinds of things that basically, it's tough finding 2 or 3 guys to go, forget taking the easy way out. Let's go down this road that, again, nobody wants to go, that if we fail, it was assumed we were, but if we succeed, look at it. We become the people to become the trendsetters. We become the trailblazers, and let everybody else try to do knockoffs of us. Let everybody else now, if this show's such a success, let them try and do dark cartoons. Let them try and bring Japanese entertainment and European entertainment over to America. Let them try and say, hey, we can do sophistication for adults, and we can present these ideas that don't have to be Dumbo, because again, there comes a time as an individual where you don't want mom buying your videos at Blockbuster. You want to go pick out your own. You want to be, and that mom doesn't like it makes it even cooler. So here's we're at the point where now Spawn is supposed to kill. He's now looking, and here we go. We get to the climax. Does Spawn kill? He gets his eyes. They start to flare on us. The emotions start to flare. The costume goes out. Gonna wrap around his neck. It's gonna wrap around his leg. He's gonna pick this guy up. We do some cool lighting here. The cape also comes in a slow way and saves the little girl in a tender way. Look at how the cape reacts in the way that it's being aggressive to Billy, the child killer, and how it gently is lapping up the little girl, because again, both of those are feeding off different emotions. And now this is his moment of reckoning with the clown going, here we go, kill him. Kill him. That's right, take him out, Spawn, because again, we need you to be this black, dark killer of hell. And all of his instincts are coming that he should. And here's where we throw a little bit of the gray matter in here, that even though he has killed in the past, and in this series, he decides that this guy isn't worth his time and effort, and that he doesn't care because what's more important at this point is the little girl. Now the clown isn't too impressed here.
That wasn't in the
Now
goddamn script.
see, listen to the clown here.
I don't think you realize what's at stake here. Get with the fucking program.
Yeah, see, he's not too impressed with that he set this whole program up, and that somehow Spawn hasn't read basically the last card, and that he's not basically following the game plan here. Because again, that it's like he now is going to look like a failure.
Ice cream.
But given that you and I don't think the child killer should live, let's just see if we can't put a bit of a cap to the whole Billy Kincaid scenario so we don't have to deal with him. So Hell says, since you're evil, we will take you out ourselves. Thank you very much. Since we gave you the evil, we will take it back. Thank you. So we do put the cap on in the period to this storyline, and now we have Spawn with the little girl trying to say that it's more important for me to keep the safety of the girl. It's not even about the girl. The girl basically is just a manifestation of Wanda, which is his wife. That it's like, if the girl dies, Wanda will be sad. If Wanda's sad, then I'm not doing what I should be doing. So if I save the girl and the girl lives and she goes back to her mom and her mom is happy and her happy mom is my ex-wife, that it's more important for my wife to be happy, even though I'm now in this tormented life, than to worry about whether I kill Billy Kincaid. So here's a moment here that if you just saw that he handed the little girl something. And again, since you got a laser disc, if you didn't, you can go back. But he just gave something to the little girl. Yeah. And the little girl leaves. We're going to have some good music here. You might want to get your Kleenexes out, folks, because this is the moment we all been waiting for. That the little girl comes out, Spawn's got the little sad eyes, and he's starting to see that really maybe there's no place for him now, and that maybe he needs to just figure out something else other than just killing and haunting his wife and tormenting, her existence by, his actions. But her little girl now gets to go free. And again, if there's any women in the crowd, like I said, especially those of you that have got nieces or little girls of yourself, this becomes a moment that at least if you ask your wife or your girlfriend to watch this with you, if you just tell her to just close her eyes for the first 122 minutes and then open it up in the last two, she'll really enjoy the show. So here's the little kid coming out. Honey? We got the backlighting again. We keep the drama here. Now mom is going to find out. And again, I got two little girls, so this is the only thing that redeems me with my real Wanda. Here comes Wanda. And now listen who she thanks.
Thank you, God.
And she thanks God for the return of her child's safety, even though it was Spawn, a guy from the pit of hell. A little bit of play on the old tale here, folks. That again, and what does the little girl have for her?
Honey,
the
where'd
ring.
you get this?
It's the ring of her late husband from 5 years ago.
Who, sweetheart?
The sad man.
And it was the sad man that gave it to her. So the little girl understands that this man, that though he's going through all this stuff, is somehow tormented. Even though he was fighting and beating up on Billy Kincaid, that he's somehow tormented. And that as a little kid, you get to the core of what is on there, and that she realizes that this guy somehow is kind of lost, lonely soul, and that now we have the nice happy ending here. So again, all those moms that are going to give me hell and on the Oprah show someday, I'm going to show them these last 2 minutes here. And now we pan back to the city because it's big and it's lonely. And what's our ending shot here? Let's just let the music play it out here. Here's the silhouette of our boy.
A time
and then we have our
comes when the
voiceover.
stage is set.
I'll be quiet.
All
Listen to the
sides have
last
been
line,
chosen.
folks.
The world and its rules have been defined. And the real war, in all its apocalyptic horror, is finally ready to begin.
And so the stage has only been set. And so even though it looks like an ending, it's actually just begun. Hey, Tiffany McFarlane, you saw her name. That's my little sister, helped me and assisted me along the way. That I ended up firing after it was all done, so God bless her.